Welcome dear audience, students and scholars. Here I am Dr. Amjad Ali. Dear scholars, once George Orwell said that probably the single most important macroeconomic relationship is the Phillips curve. So following the idea of George Orwell, Milton Friedman once said there is always a temporary trade-off between inflation and unemployment, and there is no permanent trade-off. The temporary trade-off comes not from inflation per se, but from unanticipated inflation, which generally means from a rising rate of inflation. So most economists analyze short-term fluctuations in national income and the price level using the model of aggregate demand and aggregate supply. In our previous videos, we examined aggregate demand in detail, and the IS and LM model together with its open economy cousin, the Mundell-Fleming model, shows how changes in monetary and fiscal policy and shocks to the money and goods market shift the aggregate demand curve. So in this video, we turn our attention towards the aggregate supply and develop theories that explain the position and slope of aggregate supply curve. When we introduced the aggregate supply curve in our previous videos, we established that aggregate supply behaves differently in the short run than in the long run. In the long run, prices are flexible and the aggregate supply curve is vertical. In the long run, the prices being the flexible when the aggregate supply curve is vertical, shifts in the aggregate demand curve affect the price level, but the output of the economy remains at its natural level. By contrast, in the short run, prices are sticky and the aggregate supply curve is not vertical. In this case, shifts in aggregate demand do cause fluctuations in output. So in our previous video, we took a simplified view of price stickiness by drawing the short-run aggregate supply curve as horizontal line representing the extreme situation in which all prices are fixed. So here our task now is to refine this understanding of short-run aggregate supply to better reflect the real world in which some prices are sticky and some are not. So for this purpose, in this video, we are focusing the basic theory of aggregate supply. So when classes in physics study ball rolling down inclined planes, they often begin by assuming away the existence of friction. This assumption makes the problem simpler and is useful in many circumstances, but no good engineer would ever take this assumption as a literal description of how the world works. Similarly, in this video or in our previous videos, we start our discussion with classical macroeconomic theory, but it would be a mistake to assume that this model is always true. Our job now to look at more deeply into the frictions of macroeconomics. So for this, we are going to discuss the basic theory of aggregate supply. So first, the basic theory of aggregate supply. We have two prominent models of aggregate supply. In both models, some market imperfections, we can say that some type of frictions causes the output of the economy to deviate from its natural level. As a result, the short-run aggregate supply curve is upward sloping rather than vertical, and shifts in the aggregate demand curve causes output to fluctuate. These temporary deviations of output from its natural level represent the booms and the bursts of the business cycle. So each of these two models takes us down a different theoretical route by which each route ends up in the same place. That final destination is a short-run aggregate supply equation of the firm. So we have a short-run aggregate supply equation like Y is equal to Y over bar plus alpha into P minus EP, and we have alpha is greater than 0. So here Y is output and Y over bar is the natural level of output, and P is the price level, and EP is the expected price level. This equation states that output deviates from its natural level when the price level deviates from the expected level. The parameter alpha here indicates that how much output responds to unexpected changes in the price level. We have suppose that it is 1 over alpha is the slope of aggregate supply curve. Each of the models tells a different story about what lies behind this short-run aggregate supply equation. In other words, each model highlights a particular reason why unexpected movements in the price level are associated with fluctuations in aggregate output. So let's move towards first the sticky price model. Okay, the most widely accepted explanation for the upward sloping short-run aggregate supply curve is called the sticky price model. This model emphasizes that firms do not instantly adjust the prices they charge in response to changes in demand. So sometimes prices are set by long-term contracts between firms and consumer or customers. Even without formal agreements, firms may hold prices steady to avoid annoying their regular customers with frequent price changes. So some prices are sticky because of the way certain markets are structured. Once a firm has printed and distributed its catalog or price list, it is costly to alter prices. And sometimes sticky prices can be a reflection of sticky wages. Firms base their prices on the cost of production, and wages may depend on social norms and notions of fairness that evolve only slowly over time. Okay, while talking about the price sticky model, there are various ways to formalize the idea of sticky prices to show how they can help explain an upward sloping aggregate supply curve. Okay, here we examine an especially simple model. First, consider the pricing decisions of individual firms and then add together the decision of many firms to explain the behavior of the economy as a whole. To fully understand the model, we have to depart from assumption of perfect competition. Perfectly competitive firms are price takers rather than price setters. If we want to consider how firms set prices, it is natural to assume that these firms have at least some monopolistic control over the prices they charge. Okay, while talking about the further explanation about the sticky price model, consider the pricing decision facing a typical firm. The firm's desired price P depends on two macroeconomic variables. Okay, the overall price level P, a higher price level implies that the firm's costs are higher, hence the higher the overall price level, the more the firm would like to charge for its output. And the second, the level of aggregate income. Why a higher level of income raises the demand for the firm's product? Because marginal cost increases at higher levels of production. The greater the demand, the higher the firm's desired prices. So we can write the firm's desired price as we have here. P is equal to P plus A into Y minus Y over bar. This equation says that the desired prices, here we have the lowercase p, depends on overall prices. P, uppercase P presents the overall prices, and on the aggregate output we have Y is the aggregate output relative to the natural level of output, that is Y over bar. Here the parameter A, which is greater than 0, measures how much the firm desired price responds to change in the aggregate output. Okay, while further explanation about the sticky price model, now assume that there are two types of firms. Some have flexible prices. They always set their prices according to this equation. Okay, others have sticky prices. They announce their prices in advance based on what they expect economic conditions to be. So the firms with sticky prices set prices according to, we have this equation for that. P is equal to EP plus A into EY minus EY over bar. So this equation present that before here we have E represent the expected value of these variables. So the desired price depends upon expected overall prices, expected overall national income, and expected natural rate of output or income. So for simplicity, we assume that these variables expect output to be at its natural level, so that the last term here, the last term A into EY minus EY over bar is 0. Then these firms set the prices. Okay, then our equation become as P is equal to EP. So this means that desired price is equal to the expected price level in the economy. So that firm with sticky prices set their prices based on what they expected other firms to charge. Okay, while the further discussion about the sticky price model, we now use the pricing rules of the two groups of firms to drive the aggregate supply equation. Okay, to do this, we find the overall price level in the economy, which is a weighted average of prices set by two groups. If S here, let's say S is the fraction of firms with sticky prices, and 1 minus S is the fraction with flexible prices, then the overall price level equation become as P is equal to S EP plus 1 minus S into P plus A into Y minus Y over bar, and we have a bracket hole here. So here the first term is the prices of the sticky, when the firm has the sticky prices, and the sticky price forms weighted by their fraction. So in the economy, the second term presents here is the price of flexible firm weighted by their fraction as well. So now subtract 1 minus SP from both sides of this equation to obtain this equation. We have SP P is equal to SEP plus 1 minus S into A into Y minus Y over bar. Now divide both sides by S to solve for the overall price level. So we get here overall price level is equal to EP plus 1 minus S, and we have here A over S into Y minus Y over bar. The two terms in this equation are explained as follow. The first part here, when the firms expect a high price level, they expected high cost. Those firms that fix prices in advance set their price high. These high prices cause the overall price firms overall prices at high level. Hence, expected price level EP leads to a high actual price level P. So when output is high, the demand for goods is high. Those firms with flexible prices set their price at high level, leads to a high level price overall the economy. The effect of output on the price level depends on proportion of firms with flexible prices. Hence the overall price level equation here depends on the expected price level and the level of output in the economy. Okay, then the algebraic rearrangement puts this aggregate pricing equation into more familiar form, that is Y is equal to Y over bar plus alpha into P minus EP. Okay, here alpha present that the sticky price model says that the deviation of output from the natural level is positively related with the deviation of the price level from the expected price level. Okay, let's move toward the other discussion, that is an alternative theory, the imperfect information model. Okay, another explanation for the upward slope of the short run aggregate supply curve is called the imperfect information model. Unlike the previous model, this model assumed that markets clear, that is, all prices are free to adjust to balance supply and demand. In this model, the short run and long run aggregate supply curves differ because of temporary misperceptions about prices. The imperfection information model assumes that each supplier in the economy produces a single good and consumes many goods. Because the number of goods is so large and the suppliers cannot observe all prices at all times. So they monitor closely the prices of what they produce, but less closely the prices of all the goods they consume. Because of imperfect information, they sometimes confuse changes in the overall price level of the economy with changes in the relative prices. Okay, this confusion influences decisions about how much to supply, and it leads to a positive relationship between the price level and output in the short run. Okay, while the other explanation about an alternative theory, the imperfect information model. Okay, now consider the decision facing a single supplier and asparagus farmer, for instance. Because the farmer earns income from selling asparagus and uses this income to buy goods and services, the amount of asparagus she chooses to produce depends on the prices of asparagus relative to prices of other goods and services in the economy. If the relative prices of asparagus is high, the farmers is motivated to work hard and produce more asparagus because the reward is great. If the relative prices of asparagus is low, she prefers to enjoy more layer and produce less asparagus. Unfortunately, when the farmer makes her production decision, she does not know the relative price of asparagus. As an asparagus producer, she monitors the asparagus market closely and always knows the nominal price of asparagus. But she does not know the prices of all the other goods in the economy. She must therefore estimate the relative price of asparagus using the nominal price of asparagus and her expectation of the overall price level. Okay, now consider how the farmer responds if all prices in the economy, including the prices of asparagus, increase. One possibility is that she expected this change in prices when she observed an increase in the prices of asparagus. Her estimate of its relative price is unchanged. She does not work any harder. Okay, the other possibility is that the farmer did not expect the price level to increase. When she observed the increase in the price of asparagus, she is not sure whether other prices have risen in the economy. Or we can say that which case asparagus relative price is unchanged, or whether only the price of asparagus has risen, in which case its relative price is high. The rational inferences is that some of each has happened. Okay, in other words, the farmer infers from the increase in the nominal price of asparagus that its relative price has risen somewhat. She works harder and produces more. So our asparagus farmer is not unique. Her decisions are similar to those of her neighbors as well, who produce other vegetables or other, we can say the other products. When the price level rise unexpectedly, all suppliers in the economy observe increases in the prices of goods they produce. They all infer rationally but mistakenly that the relative prices of the good they produce have risen. They work harder and produce more. Okay, to sum up, the imperfect information model says that when actual prices exceed expected prices, supplier raise their output. The model implies an aggregate supply curve with the similar form. So we have y is equal to y over bar plus a into P minus EP. So output deviates from the natural level with the price level deviates. When the price level deviates from the expected price level. The imperfect information story describes here is the version developed originally by Nobel Prize winner economist that we call Robert Lucas in 1970s. Work on imperfect information model of aggregate supply has taken a somewhat different approach. Rather than emphasizing confusion about relative prices and absolute price level, as Lucas did, this new work stresses the limited ability of individuals to incorporate information about the economy into their decision making. In this case, the frictions that causes the short-run aggregate supply curve to be upward sloping is not the limited availability of information, but is instead the limited ability of the people to absorb process of information that is widely available. This information processing constraint causes price setters to respond slowly to macroeconomic news. The resulting equation for this equation here shows that short-run aggregate supply curve is similar to those from the two models we have seen, even though the microeconomic foundations are somewhat different. Okay, let's move towards the implications of the aggregate supply curve. Okay, the two models of aggregate supply and market imperfection, the each uses to explain why the short-run aggregate supply curve is upward sloping. One model assumes the prices of some goods are sticky. The second model assumes information about prices is imperfect. So keep in mind that these models are incompatible with one another. We need not accept one model and reject the other. The world may contain both of these market imperfections as well as some others, and all of them may contribute to the behavior of short-run aggregate supply curve. Okay, then the two models of aggregate supply differ in their assumptions and emphasizes, but their implications for aggregate output are similar. Both can be summarized by this equation. We have y is equal to y over bar plus alpha into P minus EP. So this equation states that deviation of output from the natural level are related to deviation of price level from the expected price level. If the price level is higher than the expected price level, the output exceeds its natural level. If the price level is lower than the expected price level, the output falls short of its natural level. So let's see a graphical presentation for that purpose. We have the short-run aggregate supply curve here. We have income output y on x-axis. We have price level P on y-axis. We have a vertical long-run aggregate supply curve and we have a short-run aggregate supply curve that is y is equal to y over bar plus alpha into P minus EP. So intersection of the short run and long run aggregate supply curve will decide the national income, that is y over bar. So this is actually natural level of output, and we have a price level that is our overall prices are equal to the expected price level. Now what happens here, if we see this part here, we have overall price level is less than the expected price level, and on the above part we have the overall price level is greater than expected price level. Notice that the short run aggregate supply curve is drawn here for a given expectation, here expected price, and that a change in expected price will shift the aggregate supply, short run aggregate supply curve up and down. So here output deviates from its natural level. Here we have y over bar is natural output. If the price deviates from the expected price level. So if this happened, then what happened to the output, and if this happened, then what happened to the output. So let's see how a shift in aggregate demand leads to short-run fluctuations in the economy. Let's see another graphical presentation for that. How shifts in aggregate demand lead to short-run fluctuations. We have income, output, Y on x-axis. We have price level P on y-axis. We have a vertical long-run aggregate supply curve, and we have a short-run aggregate supply curve S1, and we have a downward sloping aggregate demand curve. And we know that the intersection of these three curves will decide the equilibrium point, where we have that price level, that is P1. Our expected price is equal to the overall price, or our expected second period price are equal to the first period overall prices. And at this point we have that level of income, that is Y1. So this reveals that our overall national income is equal to the first period income and third period income and our natural level of output. So here the economy begins in the long run equilibrium at point A. So when aggregate demand increases unexpectedly, so our aggregate demand curve shift rightward or upward, AD2. So now this aggregate demand curve intersect the aggregate supply curve at this point. So this will raises our price level from P1 to P2. So this will raises prices, short run prices from P1 to P2, and this will also raises our national income from Y1 to Y2. So because the price level P is above the expected level, at this point we have the expected level is price are lower than the our overall price level. So output rise temporarily, automatically. We have a rise, a long run increase in the prices, and that is a P3, and this will raise our overall supply, and we have a aggregate supply curve 2 here. So the economy is at equilibrium at point C. So as the economy moves along the short run aggregate supply curve from point A to point B, and in the long run the expected price rises to EP3, so causing the short run aggregate supply curve shift upward. The economy returns to a new long run equilibrium at point C, where output is back at its natural level. So that's why we put Y is equal to Y3 and is equal to Y over bar. Okay, this will reveal that we have a short run fluctuation in output from Y1 to Y2, and our equilibrium changes from A point to point B, and then we reaches on the natural level of output at point C. Here our aggregate demand and short run aggregate supply and long run aggregate supply curve intersect each other. So know that we have a better understanding of aggregate supply. So let's see the overall description of this graph. Our aggregate supply equation shows that how the economy responds to unexpected increase in demand attributable, says that to unexpected monetary expansion. The short run equilibrium moves from point A to point B. The increase in demand raises the price level from P1 to P2. Because people did not expect this increase in the price level, the expected price level remains at EP2. So output rise from Y1 to Y2, which is above the natural level. So see here at this point we have a higher level of overall output than the natural level. Thus, the unexpected expansion in the demand causes the economy to boom. Yet the boom does not last forever. In the long run, the expected price level rises from EP2 to EP3. So, causing the short-run aggregate supply curve to shift upward from AS1 to AS2, and the expected price level rise from EP2 to EP3. The equilibrium of the economy moves from point B to point C. The actual price level rise from P2 to P3, and the overall output from Y2 to Y3. So see here, Y2 to Y3. In other words, the economy returns to the natural level of output in the long run, but at much as a higher price level also. This analysis shows an important principle which holds for both models of aggregate supply. Long-run monetary neutrality and short-run monetary non-neutrality are perfectly compatible. Short-run neutrality is represented here by the movement from point A to point B, and the long-run monetary neutrality is represented by the movement from point A to point C. We reconcile the short-run and long-run effects of the money by emphasizing the adjustment of expectations about the price level. So this is all about the basic theory of aggregate supply. So see you with another video. Ciao.